It was the kind of night that made the world feel forgotten. The sky was an endless void of gray, snow drifting slowly and silently through the shadows of a city that never quite went to sleep. The cold didn't just bite. It gripped, seeped into the bones, and squeezed the spirit until everything felt numb. On the edge of an aging bakery along Maple and Fifth, a boy no older than 12 curled into himself beneath a broken streetlight. The glass in the bulb was cracked, and it flickered uncertainly above him like a dying star. He sat hunched in the corner, thin arms wrapped around his shivering knees, his clothes barely rags. The sleeves of his too small hoodie ended far above his wrists, revealing raw, red skin rubbed raw from the cold. His jeans were torn at the knees, exposing pale skin that had turned an unnatural shade of blue. His shoes were mismatched, one a scuffed sneaker, the other a broken boot held together by duct tape. No socks. His name was Eli Carter, and he hadn't been warm in weeks. He had chosen this corner after being chased out of a bus station 3 blocks over. There, a janitor had seen him asleep behind a vending machine and called security. It wasn't unusual. Everywhere Eli went, someone told him to leave. He didn't look right. He smelled wrong. He was alone. The world didn't have a place for boys like him. Not since his mother died of pneumonia in a shelter, almost a year ago. Not since he ran away from the foster home with the shouting father and the locked fridge. Since then, he had wandered like a ghost, living off what he could find in dumpsters and alleyways, sometimes lucky enough to beg a warm sandwich or a granola bar from a stranger in a better mood than most. Tonight, though, was colder than it had been all week. Colder than any night he remembered. His fingers hurt too much to rub together, and when he touched his face, he couldn't feel his nose anymore. He had wrapped the remains of a garbage bag around his shoulders like a shawl, but it did little to stop the chill. He told himself to stay awake. Sleep was dangerous. He had read that somewhere in a library he had snuck into for warmth last month. Sleeping in the cold could mean not waking up. But the exhaustion was deep. It tugged at his eyelids and weighted down his limbs until they felt like stone. He didn't hear the patrol car at first. Officer Nathan Reyes was on his 4th year of night patrol in the South District of the city. A former Marine and now a 36-year-old beat cop, Nathan had seen his share of hard nights. He had once broken up a fight in a freezing alley where both men ended up in the ER. He had seen overdoses on sidewalks and runaway teens shaking behind dumpsters. But he had never quite grown numb to it. Maybe it was because he lost his wife 3 years ago. Maybe because they'd always wanted kids. Maybe he simply had too much empathy for his own good. Whatever it was, Nathan couldn't turn away when someone was suffering. It was just after midnight when he spotted the small shape on the sidewalk. At first, he thought it was a trash pile that had blown against the bakery wall. But as his headlights passed, something about the shape made him slow down. He reversed slightly, leaned closer, and squinted through the falling snow. That's when he saw the faint movement, a slight twitch of an arm, a shiver. He turned off the engine, grabbed a flashlight, and stepped out into the cold. "Hey," he called gently as he approached. "Hey, kid, you okay?" The boy didn't respond. Nathan crouched down, keeping his distance so as not to startle him. He saw the rawness in the boy's cheeks, the cracked lips, the eyes barely open. "My name's Officer Reyes. I'm with the city police. I'm not here to hurt you. Are you hurt?" The boy stirred slightly, his voice a faint whisper. "No." Nathan exhaled and stepped closer. "What's your name?" The boy murmured. "A lie." "Okay. That's good. Do you have somewhere to go? Somewhere safe?" The boy just shook his head. Nathan looked him over again. The boy's fingers were stiff, his movements sluggish, his skin dangerously pale. This wasn't just homelessness. This was hypothermia setting in. Nathan didn't hesitate another second. Without a word, he shrugged off his own thick police, issued winter coat, and wrapped it around the boy, tucking it under his legs and around his shoulders. Eli flinched at the sudden warmth, but didn't resist. His eyes closed slightly as his body registered the change in temperature. Nathan reached for his radio. "Dispatch, this is Unit 14. I've got a minor here, likely under 13. No signs of adult supervision. Severe exposure. I'm taking him to County General. Immediate medical. Copy that 14. The voice crackled back. He gently lifted Ely into his arms. The boy was frighteningly light, like lifting a bundle of sticks. Nathan hurried to the cruiser, carefully placing Ely in the back seat and cranking the heat. He turned on his dashboard lights and took off through the snowy streets. Urgency in every turn. At County General Hospital, the nurses met him at the ER door. He's hypothermic, Nathan told them. No ID. His name's Eli. Within minutes, Ely was on a gurney, surrounded by medical staff wrapping him in warming blankets and inserting an IV. Nathan watched from outside the glass room, his coat still draped around the boy. He felt a pang of guilt. What if he had arrived 15 minutes later? What if Eli hadn't been visible under the streetlight? Hours passed. Nathan waited in the hallway, sipping burnt coffee from a vending machine, coatless and still in his duty belt. Eventually, a young pediatrician came out. He's going to be okay, she said with a tired smile. Another hour and it could have been very different. You got to him just in time. Does he have any family? No ID, no records. We'll alert CPS, but cases like this, it's hard to say. He mentioned being in foster care before. Probably ran away. Nathan nodded, but something in him twisted. He couldn't get the boy's eyes out of his head. How hollow they looked. How used to pain he seemed. By morning, the snow had stopped, and Ely was stable. Nathan returned to the room. The boy was awake, sipping warm soup from a paper cup. He didn't say much at first, but when Nathan sat down beside him, he looked over and said softly, "Thank you for the coat." Nathan smiled. "You needed it more than I did." "Most people don't stop," Ely added, still staring into his cup. "They should," Nathan replied. "I'm sorry they didn't." There was silence for a few moments before Eli spoke again, his voice small. "Are they going to send me back to that place?" Nathan's jaw clenched. What place? The home. The group one. They had rules. If you talked back, you didn't get food. If you cried, they locked you in the quiet room. Nathan leaned forward. "Did you tell anyone?" Eli shook his head. "Nobody listens." Nathan did. He spent the rest of that day making calls. First to Child Protective Services, then to his captain, then to a friend in social services. He didn't know what the end result would be. But he knew one thing: he couldn't just walk away. He came back the next day, and the next. He brought comic books and new socks. He told Eli about his life, about working nights and being in the Marines, about how his wife used to bake banana bread every Sunday. Slowly, the boy began to open up. He shared stories about his mom, about how she sang old songs to help him sleep when they stayed at shelters. He showed Nathan his notebook, half full of pencil sketches of animals and cities and imaginary places where kids could fly. Nathan laughed one afternoon and said, "You've got talent. Ever think about being an artist?" Eli shrugged. "I dunno. I just draw 'cause I don't want to forget stuff." "Like what?" "Like when I was warm, or safe." That night, Nathan drove home to his small apartment in silence. His spare bedroom was just a storage space, filled with boxes and old books. He stood in the doorway, staring at it, his mind racing. Could he do it? Could he take in a child? The question wasn't whether he wanted to. It was whether he could. He had no parenting experience. He worked nights. He carried emotional scars that never fully healed. But none of that changed the fact that when he looked at Eli, he saw a boy who had been failed by everyone, who was supposed to protect him. And he couldn't be another one of those people. As the snow began to fall again outside his window, Nathan made a decision that would change both their lives forever. He picked up the phone, called the CPS supervisor who had been assigned to Eli's case, and said 6 simple words. "I want to foster the boy." The sun filtered through thin curtains as the city thawed beneath the breath of early spring. For most, it was just another day, but for Eli Carter, it was the first day of something unimaginable. A day he didn't have to fight for warmth, food, or dignity. He sat at the edge of a real bed, in a room with real walls, wearing clothes that weren't torn or dirty. The blanket around his shoulders was soft and thick, unlike the scratchy ones from the shelter or the ragged hoodie he'd worn for months. Everything in this place, the modest 2-bedroom apartment belonging to Officer Nathan Reyes, felt too good to be true, and for a boy who'd been abandoned by nearly every system meant to protect him, trusting anything that felt good was terrifying. Nathan stood at the stove in the kitchen, humming softly while flipping pancakes. He wore sweatpants and a faded T-shirt with a Marine Corps emblem on the back. His badge and duty belt rested on the dining table, temporarily forgotten in favor of a different kind of service, feeding a child who had gone unnoticed by the world for far too long. Eli watched him cautiously from the hallway, half expecting the man to turn around and yell at him, like so many had in the group homes or shelters. But Nathan just turned, caught Eli's eye, and smiled gently. "Hope you like pancakes. I wasn't sure how many you'd want, so I made enough for an army." Eli nodded slowly and walked toward the table, his bare feet hesitant on the wooden floor. He sat in one of the 2 chairs, unsure whether to say thank you or remain silent. Nathan placed a plate in front of him, filled with steaming golden pancakes, butter melting down the sides and maple syrup in a bottle beside them. "You can pour your own syrup," Nathan said. "Some people like it light, others drown the whole stack." Eli picked up the bottle like it was made of glass. His hands trembled slightly, but he managed to pour a careful stream before setting it down again. Nathan took a seat across from him and dug into his own plate, giving the boy space to eat without pressure. For several minutes, they sat in silence, the only sound the occasional clink of a fork. "This is good," Eli murmured finally, his voice barely audible. Nathan looked up smiling. "Thanks. I burned a few batches before I got the hang of it." "You live here alone?" Eli asked, eyes scanning the small apartment. "Yeah, used to be just me, but now," Nathan paused, then smiled again. "Now it's us, if that's okay with you." Eli said nothing. A small part of him wanted to believe it, but he'd been placed before, promised things before. He'd learned that adults' words didn't always match their actions. After breakfast, Nathan showed Eli around the apartment again. The boy's room had been painted a calming blue, and Nathan had stocked it with age-appropriate books, a few board games, a new set of bedding, and a second-hand desk. There was even a framed art print of superheroes on the wall, characters Eli had once admired in old comics left behind at shelters. "I know it's not huge," Nathan said, "but it's yours. If there's anything you want to change or add, we'll do it together." Eli nodded slowly, his eyes tracing every detail. He still hadn't touched the closet, unsure whether the clothes inside were really meant for him. Nathan noticed and opened the door, revealing neatly hung shirts, pants, and even a new winter coat. "These are all yours," he said gently. "You don't have to wear the same clothes every day anymore." The boy didn't respond. He simply stared at the coat for a long time. That afternoon, Nathan took him to get a haircut. The barber, a retired officer named Louis, didn't ask questions. He just chatted with Eli like he was any other kid, showing him how to pick a style, and even letting him try on different capes. When they left, Eli's hair was neat, and his face looked cleaner, brighter. He caught a glimpse of his reflection in the shop window, and stared at it like it was someone else. They stopped at a corner bookstore on the way back. Nathan gave Eli $20 and told him to choose whatever he wanted. The boy walked slowly down the aisles, fingers trailing along the spines of books he never dreamed of owning. In the end, he picked a sketch pad, 2 pencils, and a used book on animals. At checkout, the clerk smiled kindly and gave him a small discount, saying, "First customer of the day gets lucky." Later that evening, as Nathan did the dishes, he glanced over and saw Eli sitting on the living room rug, sketching in silence. The boy was curled up, completely immersed, drawing what looked like a wolf standing on a cliff beneath a starry sky. Nathan watched for a moment, struck by how peaceful the scene was. The quiet hum of domestic life, the scent of soap and warmth. For the first time in years, he felt a deep, content silence he hadn't known since his wife died. But trauma doesn't vanish overnight. That night around 3 a.m., Nathan was woken by a scream. He bolted from bed, rushing into Eli's room to find the boy tangled in sheets, thrashing, eyes wide open but unseeing. Nathan knelt beside him and placed a hand gently on his shoulder. "It's okay. You're safe. I'm here." The boy jerked awake, gasping for breath, his chest rising and falling with panicked urgency. Tears streamed down his face, and he recoiled as if expecting to be struck. Nathan didn't push. He just stayed there, calm, steady. Eventually, Ellie recognized him and collapsed into his arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "They locked me in a closet," he whispered, "in the home. When I cried, they said I was weak." And Nathan closed his eyes, heart aching. "You're not weak. Crying isn't weakness, and no one's ever locking you anywhere again. You're home now, Eli, I swear it." They sat on the floor for nearly an hour until the boy fell asleep again in Nathan's arms. He carried him gently back to bed, tucked him in, and sat beside him until dawn began to rise over the city skyline. Over the next few weeks, routines began to form. Mornings were filled with cereal and brushing teeth, backpacks and lunchboxes. Nathan adjusted his patrol schedule to work later shifts so he could drop Eli off at school and attend weekly therapy sessions the social worker had recommended. The therapist, Dr. Marla Green, was a warm, soft-spoken woman who never pushed too hard. Eli was reluctant at first, barely speaking during their first 2 visits. But on the third, he brought his sketchbook. He drew while she talked, and then finally, without being asked, began explaining the pictures. "This one's the alley, where I slept last Christmas. And this one, that's Officer Reyes," giving me his coat. After that session, Dr. Green pulled Nathan aside. "He's been through significant trauma. But he's bright, and there's a resilience in him. He trusts you. That's rare for a child who's been through what he has." "Then I won't let him down," Nathan said firmly. He didn't. Nathan became the kind of father Eli never imagined existed. He taught him how to ride a bike, how to tell time, how to cook scrambled eggs. He helped with homework, played catch in the park, even took him to the art museum on weekends. They talked about the past, but only when Eli brought it up. Nathan never forced healing. He just created space for it. On Eli's 13th birthday, his first real birthday party, Nathan invited Louie from the barbershop, Dr. Green, 2 teachers from school, and a boy from class named Leo who had become Eli's first friend. They ate pizza and cake, and Eli opened a small stack of gifts, including a new set of sketch markers and a framed photo of him and Nathan standing in front of the police cruiser. After the guests left, Eli sat on the couch, holding the frame. "You know what I wished for?" he asked quietly. Nathan looked over. "What?" "That I never have to go back." And Nathan reached over and squeezed his shoulder. "You won't. I promise." And he meant it. The foster process became adoption proceedings by the end of the summer. The paperwork was daunting, but Nathan handled it. Eli's caseworker, Ms. Dorsey, saw no reason to delay. Nathan had given the boy stability, love, and structure. The court date was set for early October. On the morning of the adoption hearing, Eli wore a button-down shirt and jeans, his hair neatly combed. He clutched Nathan's hand as they stood before the judge. "I want to stay with Officer Reyes," he said clearly when asked. "He's my real family." Nathan couldn't hold back the emotion. Neither could the judge. The gavel hit the block, and just like that, Eli became Eli Reyes. As they walked out of the courtroom, the city seemed brighter somehow. Eli looked up at Nathan and asked, "Can I still keep your coat?" Nathan laughed, draping an arm around the boy's shoulders. "That coat is yours forever." And with that, they walked forward, father and son, into a future that neither had expected, but both had been waiting for their entire lives.